What is the definition of Zionism? What does it mean to be a Zionist? In this week's Haftorah, it is very explicit what the definition of a Zionist is. And we will get to that in a few short moments. But to begin with, the opening verse, which is Anochi, Anochi, Hu Menachemchem. God says, I will be the one who comforts you. As the Medrash tells us that there were 7 Haftorahs of consolation. After Tisha B'Av, after the destruction of the Holy Temple, for 7 Shabbosim, we read 7 different Haftorahs dealing with God consoling the Jewish people. In the first Haftorah, God sends the prophets to console us. The Jews protest in the second Haftorah, stating, we don't want a delegation of prophets. We want God himself. In the third Haftorah, the prophets convey this message to God. In the fourth Haftorah, which is our Haftorah, God himself comes to console the Jewish people. And he says, Anochi, Anochi, it is I who will bring you comfort. It's interesting to note that Anochi is the first word of the 10 Commandments. Therefore, this is a double consolation. Anochi, Anochi, twice the 10 Commandments, implying a greater revelation and a greater comfort than the revelation of God on Sinai. And after this introduction God goes on to say, who are you afraid of? A mortal? A human being who will die? As it says over here in verse number 13, 12 and 13. Who are you afraid of? Me'enoish yamus, u'ben adam chotzir yinasein. Are you afraid of a man who will die, and of the son of a man who will be set as grass, implying he's going to be buried in a cemetery and you're going to make grass over his grave? That's the person you are afraid of? And he goes on to say in number 13 and 14, why are you always worried? Batfached tamid, kol hayoim, all day, you guys, you Jewish people, you're worried about terror continually. You cannot be worried all day about terror. He goes on to say, who are you afraid of again? Mihar tsoya, lipaseyach, which the commentaries translate in a very, very humorous way. God says, who are you afraid of? Those who are constipated and they hasten to relieve themselves? These are the people that you are afraid of? God has a good sense of humor. So what is this concept of being afraid constantly? And God warns us against this. On the contrary, there's a concept called bitachon. Bitachon means to have trust in Hashem. There is emunah, which is faith. I believe God exists. But there are good things that come from God, and there are not such good things that come from God. But bitachon means I trust in God. That is going to be good. We find that Moshe Rabbeinu, the first leader and Rebbe of the Jewish people, after he saw an Egyptian slave master smiting and hitting a Jewish slave, he went over to that Egyptian slave master and he killed him. And he buried him in the ground, in the earth. And then he ran away. He said, now it has become known that I killed the Egyptian. And as the Rebbe explains, that the fact that he lost faith and he lost trust in God, saying, now it has become known, I'm worried I'm going to become punished because of this. The worry brought about the punishment. It wasn't the action that brought about the punishment. It was the concern that now people know about it, and therefore, because of this, I will be punished. It was a lack of bitochon. It was a lack of trust in God. If you're doing the right thing, if you're davening every day, you're giving tzedakah, you're wearing tefillin, you have mezuzahs on your doors, you keep Shabbos and kosher, there's nothing to worry about. Stop having fear. Stop living in terror. This is what God himself is telling us, not through the prophets, not through emissaries, but Anoichi, Anoichi, I, God, that came down on Mount Sinai. I, God, that you saw with your own eyes. I am the same God who's telling you, stop worrying. I'm here with you. I'm here to protect you. And you're going to be okay. We then move on to the next verse, which talks about Zionism, the definition of Zionism. What does it say over here? It says in verse number 16, V'asim devarai beficha. It says, V'asim devarai beficha, I have placed my words in your mouth, and with the shade of my hand have I covered you, to implant the heavens and to set a base for the earth, and to say unto Zion, you are my people. Now, the Jerusalem Talmud says like this, a very, very powerful statement. The Jerusalem Talmud said, we have searched the entire scripture and we have found no instance besides this verse that calls Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, Zionists. This is the only verse in the entire 24 books of the Torah that God says, you are my people and you are Zion. But this statement of Zionism is the end of the verse. What does he say before that? Says the Jerusalem Talmud that before that he says three things. And that is, I will place my words into your mouth. And that is the meaning of Torah. Torah is studied orally, says the Jerusalem Talmud. It's not enough that we read Torah with our eyes like a novel, but we have to articulate the Torah because we want to serve God not only with our minds and our eyes, but with our mouths, our entire body. So that's why we also shuckle and shake sometimes when we daven and when we study Torah, because it's kol atzmoisei toimarna. I want to serve God with my entire body. So I place my words in your mouth. That is the study of Torah. And I protected you with my hand. This represents charity, which you give with your hand. And that is the way we are protected from all harm. And to establish the heavens and the earth, this represents sacrifices, korbanot, in the Holy Temple, which validates the entire world and strengthens the pillars of creation. Today, there are no sacrifices. There is no Holy Temple. And prayer takes the place of sacrifices. So, in other words, in this verse, we are taught three things. Number one, the study of Torah. Number two, the giving of charity. Number three, prayer. As it says in Ethics of Our Fathers, the world stands upon three pillars. Torah, Avodah, Ugumilos Chasadim, the study of Torah, prayer, and charity. In other words, what is the definition of a Zionist? Someone who does these three things. You study Torah every day, and you give charity every day, and you pray every day, then you're a Zionist. But you could be living in Israel, in the land of Israel, in Jerusalem, standing at the Kotel, and you're not praying, and not studying Torah, and you don't give tzedakah, charity, you're not a Zionist. The Torah itself defines what the definition of a Zionist is. So the next time we say I'm a Zionist, or I'm not a Zionist, you have to ask yourself, what does a Zionist mean? So here it says, clearly, in verse number 16, L'tzion ami oto. Zion, my nation, you are Zion. When are you Zion? When are you Zion? Only after following these three things. Now, how does this connect with Zion? What is the meaning of Zion? What is the definition of the word Zion? On one hand, Zion means like mitsuyanim, those who are distinguished. On the other hand, Zion means a sign, a seman, a mnemonic. As Rabbi Shimon said, what am I? I am only a sign in this world. What is a sign? You're driving a car and you see a traffic sign. You see a road sign. It says stop. It says yield. It says go. It says dead end. It says 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour. I have traffic signs that say 90 miles an hour. What's the point of a traffic sign? I'm nothing. There's no value to a traffic sign. The only value of the traffic sign is where it directs you to go. Rabbi Shimon says, and the same is true each one of us, who God tells us clearly, you are my witnesses. We are here to be witnesses that God exists. We are here to testify that God is a reality. We are a sign that this physical world is only material and finite and not real. What is real, what is everlasting, is God. And yes, God wants us to pervade this finite physical world with spirituality, with holiness, to bring a soul into the body. But the world on its own, materialism and hedonism, is not an end in its own. So that is the definition of Tzion. One who realizes that we are a sign, we are a traffic sign for a greater reality. And to bring divine consciousness to the world, then we are Tzion. And the way we become Tzion, and the way we become Zion, and the way we bring divine consciousness into the world is very simple. Torah, avoda, gemilut chasadim. The study of Torah, prayer, and good deeds, and charity. So this is the myth. What is a Zionist? The prophet says it. And his words are the words of God. And it's right over here in Isaiah 51, verse number 16. So now that we established the definition of Zionism, let us conclude the Haftorah. God says, when Mashiach will come, Loi v'chipozoin teitzeu. When Mashiach will come, you're not going to run out of golus. Ubemenusa lo yisei lechu. And you're not going to go in the flurry of flight. How are you going to leave this golus? You're going to walk out slowly. Comes the question to mind, what is the novelty here? What is the encouragement over here? What is the prophecy here? You should know you're not going to run out of golus in haste. You're not going to run out with flurry of flight. You're going to walk out very calmly. Why? When we came, or left rather, the land of Egypt, we ran out. Why here are we walking out slowly? Chassidus has a beautiful insight and says that when it comes to serve God, there's two things. One is called iskafia, and one is called ishapcha. Iskafia means to subjugate your animal soul, to curtail your animal soul. In other words, I have a desire right now to have an ice cream. I have a desire right now to have a brownie. I have a desire right now to have a delicious steak. But I know it's not good for me. I shouldn't have so many calories. I already had 2,000 calories today. Do I want it? Yeah. Do I have a desire for it? Yeah. Do I have a taiva? Yes. But I curtail my animal soul. I subjugate my animal soul. And I don't do it. It's Shabbos. And I want to watch a movie. I want to make popcorn. I want to drive my car. But I know it's Shabbos. And therefore, I control my animal soul. I subjugate my animal soul. I curtail my animal soul. That's called the skafia. Hapcha is, I have a passion to eat a brownie. I take that excitement, I take that passion, and I open up a Gemara. I open up a Rambam. I open up a Tanya. I open up a Siddur, and I put that passion into prayer, into Torah study. I have a passion to have a brownie. I take that passion, and I make a brownie, and I give it to my next door neighbor as a gift. I take that passion, and I channel it to do a good deed. You want a brownie? Make 1,000 brownies for the entire town, for the entire community. That's channeling your animal soul. That's a much higher level than simply to suppress it. When we left Egypt, we never left Egypt. We had a struggle, one foot in, one foot out. On one hand, I don't want to be a slave anymore. On the other hand, I loved Egypt. It was like Manhattan. You had museums, and you had Broadway, and you had the ballet, and you had all the musicals, and you had all the circuses. Who wants to leave? It's an amazing, amazing, gorgeous country. Where should I go? Into a desert? That has nothing. And they had this inner struggle. God said, I'm going to make you my nation. We'll give you the Torah and Sinai. Very nice. On the other hand, I want my brownie. I want my gefilte fish. I want my steak. I don't have that in the desert. So there was a struggle. Should I go in or go out? And therefore, what did we do? We closed our eyes and we ran. We ran out. I'm running out of Egypt. With haste. I don't want to look back, because if I look back, I might want to stay. So I closed my eyes and I ran out of Egypt. That's the way we left. And that's why all those years we're still going back to Egypt. All these years we're still looking back. Maybe I left something. Maybe I left the brownie. Maybe I left the steak. I want to go back. Mashiach will come, says the prophet. You're not going to run out of this golus anymore. We're going to be refined. We're going to be elevated. We're going to be transformed through the hardships of exile and through the tremendous amount of study of Torah, and primarily since the revelation of Chassidus, through the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, etc., until our generation. Now our learning of Torah has the power to transform who we are. And therefore, when Mashiach comes, God willing, today, and we walk out of Golus, it's going to be very, very calmly. We're not going to have any regrets leaving Golus. We're not going to look back behind us what we left. On the contrary, we're walking out with our heads up high, L'Tzion, to Jerusalem, which is the essence of the soul. Because Tzion, the meaning of Tzion, is the essence of who you are. And the way we reveal the essence is by doing these three things: Torah, Avodah, Ugemilas Chasadim. Why three things? Because most of us, healthy human beings, have a natural tendency to be drawn towards good things. Some of us like to pray more. Others like to study more. Others like to be charitable and giving. It's a natural DNA that God blessed us with. And therefore, the Torah says you serve God not because you want to, but rather because you are fulfilling God's commandments. How do I know that my service to God is not personal? How do I know it's not narcissistic? Maybe I want to fulfill my desires rather than God's will. Therefore, God says you have to serve me on three different fronts. If you serve me on three different fronts that are different from each other, then we know you're not serving yourself, but rather you're serving God. And the way for this to happen is by revealing the essence of your soul. And by doing these three things, this helps us reveal the Tzion, which is the essence of our soul. So now we know what the meaning of Zionism is. And therefore, you could be a Zionist in America, if you follow these three things, and on the other hand, you can live in Israel and not be a Zionist if you don't follow these three things. Finally, we're going to blow the shofar in a moment. But before we blow the shofar, to explain why we blow the shofar every day in the month of Elul. Now, this is an interpretation. There are many reasons, but this is one insight of why we blow the shofar in the month of Elul. A story is told from the Dubna Maggid, who was famous for his parables. The Dubna Maggid said that there was a wealthy man who owned a big supermarket. And he had many customers every day. And at the end of the day, he would send an emissary, a shaliach, a young boy. He would send this young man, with a suitcase full of cash to the bank to deposit it every day in the bank. And let's say there was $100,000 in this suitcase of cash every day that he would take to the bank. And every day, as the supermarket was about to close, he would take the suitcase and run to the bank. There was a famous world ganif, a world thief, who heard about this, that there's a teenager, he's very strong, very well built, but every day he is carrying a suitcase full of $100,000 in cash to the bank. He's thinking, how am I going to grab that suitcase? How am I going to get that suitcase? He knew exactly the route he took from the supermarket to the bank. But the problem was, there were many people there on that route. Just to go there and grab the suitcase, he'll be in trouble. He needed to find a diversion. How am I going to get the suitcase? He's thinking, aha, I have it. He sees that on the route from the supermarket to the bank, there's a tailor who makes beautiful suits. He walks into the tailor, says, "Sir, my boss, he's the wealthiest man in this city. He wants me to make a suit for him." He says, "Perfect, that's what I do. I'm a tailor. I make suits for wealthy people. Send him in." He says, "I can't send him in. He's a busy man. He wants me to make the suit for him." He says, Are you the same size as him?" He says, "Actually not. So how can I make a suit for your boss if you're not the same size as him?" Aha, that's why he sent me. You see, he wants me to look and see the people walking in the street and to find someone who has the same build as him and bring him in, and you'll measure that person, and that's the suit we're going to use. Great idea. So who's the guy who has the same build? Let's look. He's watching. Oh, he sees somebody holding a suitcase. Oh, that's the guy. He's exactly the same build as my boss. Really? They both went out together. They stopped this guy with the suitcase. "Sir, you're so handsome. You're built so beautiful. Can we make a suit off you?" "Oh, sure, fantastic, no problem." He walks into the store and he says, "Look, I got to take off your jacket." "Sure, I'll take my jacket off and I'll put on my jacket." And he puts on another jacket. He starts measuring him and pulling. And as he's measuring and pulling, the thief grabs the suitcase and he runs. All of a sudden, the messenger says, "Hey, he has my suitcase." And he's about to run after him. The tailor says, "You can't run after him. You have my jacket. Get my jacket." "But he's the thief." "I don't care. I want my jacket, but he's the thief." Says the Dubna Maggid, this is the message of the month. You see, each one of us has a suitcase of $100,000 every day. Today is the month that God gives us the potential to buy ourselves a new year, to buy ourselves good deeds by giving tzedakah, by prayer, by Torah study. We have the opportunity to write for ourselves and sign for ourselves a shana tova musuka, a good year that is sweet. However, there's a thief, there's a ganif. He's the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. He doesn't want us to have a good year. He doesn't want us to be written and sealed for life and for blessing. So he finds a way to mix us up. What does he do? He calls us into the tailor shop. He gives us problems and sorrows. Every day there's a new problem. Today the heat's not working. Today the car's not working. Today the lights don't go on. Today the air conditioner's not going on. Today I can't pay my bills. and he creates all this havoc. He creates this diversion in your life, and you forget that you have the suitcase to bring into the bank. In the meantime, you take off your jacket, you take off the mitzvahs, you take off your Torah, and it's too late. Now, can you imagine if you had a friend walking with you in the street, and the tailor calls you in and tells you take off your jacket and drop down the suitcase, and your friend says, don't do it. Don't do it. Go to the bank. Forget about the suit. How thankful you would be to that friend who would remind you, don't take off your jacket, don't drop the suitcase on the floor. You would thank him very much. That is the meaning of the shofar. Every day we blow the shofar reminds us, you have a suitcase of $100,000, of $1 million in your hand. Don't drop it. Keep your eyes on the goal. So we hope and pray that the shofar will inspire us and every day will increase in these three pillars upon which the world stands: Torah, prayer, and tzedakah, good deeds. And God will surely give us a year of blessing and success, a year of health and long life, and the ultimate blessing, v'kitzu v'ranu sheikh for those who lie in the dust will rise and sing with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. And now for the blowing of the shofar. It's customary to please rise.